When I recorded Variety a few years ago, which was my last kind of real, proper album, I really felt, I mean, making albums for me is always such a difficult birth. I mean, it's such an exhausting process. And with Variety, I had to kind of produce it myself, and it was all, I decided it was going to be all self-written songs with co-writers that I work with, musicians. And it was a kind of a real kind of, I felt in a way it was kind of a last hurrah in some kind of way. And I thought afterwards, you know, I don't think I can do an album of all original songs again. Never do an album again. I thought, well, in the future I'll probably do albums that are a mixture of maybe cover songs which I enjoy doing, reinventing songs, revisit my old back catalogue, add in a couple of new ones here and there in the form of maybe an EP or something. So I really did think that, and I think whenever you do an album these days, especially from when you're kind of an artist that's a bit later in their career, and with the state of the music business at the moment, you think, this is going to be the last album I ever make. And you've got to put all that kind of heart and love and soul into it and thinking, this is my statement and this might be the last record that I ever get to make, financially or mentally or age-wise or anything. You know, it's like in the music business these days, it's a thing in turmoil. So I didn't expect to do another album of all original songs so soon. I knew I wanted to make a pop record. If I made another record, one other pop record, I thought, well, am I getting too old for pop, or I still love pop music and I love rock music. That's where I kind of come from. I still like a little bit of electro music. I still like those kind of things. And I felt I'd kind of, with Variety, summed up where I was at that period of my life. In a way, it was a traditional, it carried on that tradition, I felt, of that music hall pop. The people like Ray Davies, David Bowie, people like Pete Townsend, and all those people that had done this kind of very British pop, like vaudevillian pop. That's how I kind of felt. That was my statement on that. So I thought I'd like to do something a bit kind of, again, maybe do something more pop. And I was taken into other directions with the Time Tree with John Hall, with 10 Plagues, which were much more operatic and prog and things, very, very musical things. And I thought, well, I'd just love to do something with a catchy chorus and a 4/4 and a beat and a simple song, what I think what Noel Coward called the potency of cheap music. The chance came along to work with Tony Visconti, and I grabbed that. I hadn't got any songs planned. I literally wrote in the studio with Neil. He wrote some songs, Tony arranged them, we got the strings in. That was a wonderful way of working, a very old school way of working as well, with in the studio rehearsing the song and recording it. And it kind of, and there were original songs, but I thought, that's it, an EP. But it fired me up a little bit again. And I thought, well, what now? And then I kind of, in my lap, just straight out of the blue, like a gift from above, really, came this 3 or 4 demo tunes from Chris Braide. And Chris, of course, is known for producing a lot of very big acts, big American acts. Beyonce as one, Rihanna, Lana Del Ray. So when I got these songs that were sent to me, they were forwarded to me, and I thought, well, the message I got was, Chris wants me, he's a fan of mine, and he's followed my music, and he wants me to write with him, but write for other people. And I kind of felt, well, I really love these songs. And I kind of felt a bit wounded at first. I thought, well, why can't he send these songs to me? Because I really feel inspired by them. And I thought, I just can't write for other people. I've tried to write for other people, and I just can't. If anyone covers my songs, like David Gray covered Sail Away of Goodbye, they do so by chance. Because I write for me, for my world, for my voice, for my range, whatever my limitations are, and the things that the way I see the world. So anyway, so I kind of said, well, no, I'm not doing them. I can't write for other people. And I felt kind of a bit, why could he send his songs from me, you know? But I suppose he's a big LA producer. Why would he write songs for me? I really didn't think that. So the message came out, no, they're for you. These songs are for you. And I followed all your music. I'm a big fan of all your music. I know all your music, and I really want to write some songs with you and see where it goes. So I was really thrilled by that, and I kind of felt inspired. I felt kind of fired up again to write some songs. I thought maybe an EP. Let's do an EP of songs, or some songs that will maybe form part of another album where I'll do a few cover songs and a few this, that, and the other, or get other people to write songs for me. I really didn't feel I could do a whole album of original songs, but I was inspired. So I wrote 3 songs. I wrote Minotaur, which was kind of a song really about anger management in a way, because I have this anger management and that I've tried to kind of deal with over the years. And it's kind of about rage. It's about looking at yourself in the mirror and about turning into somebody else that you don't recognise, into this minotaur, this fearsome creature, this kind of, and also because I like to write I like to put a lot of myths in songs as well. There's a kind of eroticism about minotaurs as well. And minotaurs were in the air at the time. A lot of films were using minotaur images, so that was kind of in my mind. And I wrote Scar, which was referencing, as I always do, kind of old love affairs or things like that, and thinking back to sort of like some of the disasters, which there have been many affairs of my past. These same figures always haunt my songs. They kind of keep coming back and back and back again. Again, this theme of people turning into somebody else and being not who they are, not who you think they are.
Pain that never heals from a heart that never feels. You were already in the dark, deep underground. I don't know who you are, but loving you, my heart still bears the scar.
And Winter Sun as well, which I was very... It was just a very beautiful, beautiful tune, and I wanted to write this song. I'd been out one day and I'd been kind of in the last winter, and I wanted to write this song about the winter sun and the silhouettes and memories and things fading with that sun. And there was already a kind of pattern forming of kind of elemental things changing, things turning into other things. And I kind of started being fired up. So I sent these songs back to Chris. I did all the vocals here in London. I recorded them at Dean Street Studios with the engineer Justin Chandler that I always work with there on vocals. And I love working at Dean Street, and because it's got such a history because of Bolan and Bowie and Tony Visconti and everything else. So I sent them back to Chris, and Chris sent me back these gifts of these beautifully worked on and beautifully mixed, very posh sounding songs, very modern sounding songs. Of a different kind of production that I'd worked with for a long while. If I had to echo back, I'd think of things like Tenement Symphony, or I'd think of things like Enchanted. We worked with kind of Fairlights and programming, and Trevor Horn and Trevor Horn's stable of producers at Psalm Records. So I knew this sounds. I was very excited about the whole thing. Well, when I'd sent the first songs back to Chris, I thought, well, you know, that's a nice EP. That's very nice. And thank you very much, and it's a wonderful gift. And then Chris started sending me back, oh no, we're not finished there. We're going to have other songs. He felt kind of inspired too. And we kind of had this weird, we started this thing. I knew that I knew Chris's name, and it hadn't kind of struck me yet where I knew from. And I kind of looked all about him on the internet and read all about him and everything. And he just seemed very, very familiar to me. But I thought, let's do this thing where we started writing emails to each other backwards and forwards every day, talking about things that we liked, music that we liked. We'd talk about T-Rex, which we both loved. He liked a later period Bolan than me because he's kind of a bit younger than me, so I liked an earlier period Bolan. And we talked about Jabriath, we talked about glam rock stars that we liked and things. And we had this rapport that we kind of created this kind of email magic. So then Chris would send me another demo. I've written this other song, this other tune. He'd send me another demo, and every time it was just like a fantastic tune. And I thought he's really listened to my music and knows the kind of chords that I like, the kind of drama that I like in songs, the things that are going to fire me up and excite me, that are going to be good for the range of my voice, that I'm going to be able to sing this kind of drama that I like to sing. Or this kind of dramatic melancholia, whatever you want to call it. I'd sit there and write lyrics, and I'd go in with Justin at Dean Street. I'd record 10, 12 tracks of vocals, me singing them softly, me singing them loudly, me singing ad-libs, me singing some little harmony things. I thought I want to have some backing vocals to kind of cushion me on this record. Let's make it real kind of pop and backing vocally kind of record. I hadn't really done much like that before, and Neil came in and played some guitar. Martin McCarrick came in and played a bit of cello. I'd send all these files over to Chris and he'd create this magical thing and send this thing back. And we never talked on the phone, ever. We thought we'd never talk on the phone because we were creating this kind of email magic. So it was kind of a great way of working, and for me, I had worked a little bit like this before, sending files. As I said, albums for me always have a difficult, painful birth, and when I kind of produced most of Variety, it was exciting, but it really drained me a lot. It drained me a lot, and I still... You find things, you listen to things with very critical ears all the time, and you can't ever feel you can get into them and enjoy them till years later. So this, for me, was a wonderful, fresh way of working. It was very uncontrived. I tried to be like that with the lyrics. I tried to write things that I wouldn't labour on for ages and ages. I just write down words, phrases, things. I kind of wasn't bothered about being a bit kind of humorous or obscure or kind of arty. I thought the way I listened to the way that Mark Bolan writes lyrics, he uses these kind of images in his lyrics, you know, cosmic this and cosmic dancer and cars. He'd throw in cars and things like that, and things that we create these images. So we kind of, songs are kind of about nothing, but it's about everything at the same time. It's about what we feel it's about. So I kind of put a bit of that into my lyric writing, and things like Leather Jacket, Zip Like Leather Jacket, again, which is a kind of metamorphosis song. When you put on a jacket or an outfit or a suit or a coat, it turns you into something else. You become something else, and you play this part. And I've always loved a leather jacket. You put on a leather jacket, you become this kind of figure that you imagine in your imagination. You're a rebel, you're kind of a punk, you're a little bit dangerous. And it's a kind of humorous song, looking at that as well. The leather jacket's got a bit of humor in it as well. So I kind of throw all of these things in. Didn't labour overwriting lyrics like I had done in the past. And they're going, oh, I better just fine-tune that bit, or I better fine-tune that bit. Because I'm the first to admit I'm not the greatest songwriter in the world. It doesn't come natural. I always feel myself, it doesn't come naturally to me. I'm not somebody who can just sit down and rattle off songs and write them and give them to other people and do all sorts of things and they can sing them. I can't do that. So it was a real fresh, exciting way of writing, and I felt inspired. And before we knew it, we had like 12 songs, and we had 10, 11 songs. And Chris said, is there anything you'd like to do? I really like songs a little bit music hallish that would link it on. So he wrote me Life in My Own Way, which is kind of very kind of me with the piano singing a very kind of vaudevillian music hall style of song in a Chris Braide style.
I'll bang my own drum, and every day I'll leave all my worries behind. Leave your name on the door and say goodbye.
And I said I like things that are something that's quite repetitive and dreamy and everything. Because I've got this idea for this song, The Velvet Trail. And I'd been to visit my hometown of Southport, which always brings me with lots of evocative memories and always inspires me to get this feeling of nostalgia and childhood and growing up. And it's just that kind of place. And I'd been down to Southport Beach, and I'd seen how it had become very overgrown and turned into this big wild nature reserve. So I think they've got some red frogs and toads there, the natterjack toad or something, which has turned it into this nature reserve for the natterjack toad and newts or something. And it's called the Velvet Trail. And I walked on this nature trail, this little pathway, the Velvet Trail, and I'd find all these little treasures left, like little bits of bones and foxes had been there, the carcass of a magpie or something, old shells. And it was like walking through this nature trail of life, you know, looking back and you think, well, life is like this nature trail that always leads you back to places where you were born, like Southport. I had memories of, Chris and I talked about, when I was writing the lyrics, we talked about, because he knew Southport very well, he remembers going there when he was younger and saying, yeah, do you remember there used to be jet fighters flying overhead from the army bases nearby? I said, yeah, I remember these jet fighters flying overhead, and the sea that very rarely came in, and you'd walk out for miles to the sea, and it was kind of wonderfully romantically and desolate. Southport has been a huge influence over me, I think, and hence came the track, The Velvet Trail, this dreaming, which was like almost like, without sounding kind of dark, too dark and morbid, almost this trail that leads to death. And it's this last years of your life as you're looking back and you walk into the setting sun. And it was very romantic, and I wanted it to be very filmic and epic. If I could talk about the sounds of the records, I think Chris has really used a lot of kind of old synth sounds and Fairlight sounds and sounds that of a kind of really just, you know, gone back to those kind of synth keyboard sounds. And I kind of wanted it to be a posh pop record. I wanted it to be a rock record, to have rock elements. There's lots of guitars in there as well. There's lots of bouncy kind of guitar stuff, and it's kind of, and I think it was very important for me because Verate is great, but it's not a sexy record. I wanted to make a sexy record. I think it became very clear to me in the messages I was talking with Chris. Chris wanted to make his Marc Almond album, his best of Marc Almond album, and I was kind of really into that. I knew that he's a fan of the 80s stuff that I'd done. I knew he was a fan of the kind of Mark and the Mambas and all that stuff. And I knew that when I was getting back, I was hearing sounds and chords that referenced different parts of my career. I could tell the kind of music, the things he liked the best. But I thought that was great. That was great to kind of celebrate the elements that would make a Marc Almond record. And so I kind of, and that was lyrically as well as musically, without being pastiche or being kind of too self-referential, just to put those feelings in there and to bring a lot of those different things together. So I kind of, I kind of got that, I got that feeling from him that he wanted to make his perfect Marc Almond record, and I was really, really excited to go along with that and to kind of embrace that in a way, and embrace my part, and in a way embrace that kind of 80s part of me as well, which you go through so many years. You can think, you know, I've kind of embraced that a lot more over the past few years. Where I did enough years trying to run away from it. You know, now I feel I've got to run away. Whatever. And then so I kind of did all that running away from it. And now I kind of felt, well, it's nice to embrace it because it's a kind of a warm thing and it's kind of a nice feeling as part of my heritage. So I wasn't afraid that he'd send me back a track and I said, that sounds quite 80s. That sounds quite 80s. And it was still bugging me. Chris and I still hadn't spoken. And we still thought, we're not going to speak till after this record is finished, but I kind of knew him from somewhere, which was a kind of a weird thing. I always like to make my records like a show, like you're putting on a show that's got like an intro and an outro and a middle bit, and it kind of forms the part of a show. And I think with Velvet Trail, Chris definitely, and we both talked about it, we both like old vinyl records that you'd put on and you'd play from beginning to end. And one of the things we felt kind of bad about downloading, apart from people get a sub-quality track, an MP3 track, which is a squashed version of the track that you've spent ages of doing in the studio, is they just cherry-pick tracks. That's kind of fine because people discover your music like that. But I love the idea of people going back to doing albums where you'd put on the album and you'd have this journey and it would be like a little suite of songs that would take you on a kind of, you'd put it on and you'd listen to it and you'd sit back, you'd listen to the whole thing and it would take you on this ride all the way through it. And we wanted Velvet Trail to be like that. So Chris was very determined to put little instrumental bits between the songs, an intro, an outro, take little bits of musical passages to make it feel like an album that flowed together. Of course, people will still download separate tracks, but I would be very happy if people would download the whole record, and that's why we decided, I think, this time to make the record on vinyl as well, so people can put on a lovely vinyl record with a lovely sleeve, and they can listen to the whole record all the way through. Those are the records that I like, and I'm so happy that vinyl is kind of making a comeback, because nothing sounds like, I know it sounds like an old git sort of talking about that, you know, vinyl, but vinyl is great, and vinyl does sound like nothing else, and MP3 just sound like a squashed little thing that people play on their mobile phones and listen to, which is fine, but it's not how I made the record, or how Chris, I should say, made the record. And I thought, let's just make a sexy record, and so, you know, so I can be sexy, and you know, do sexy songs live and be sexy. Chris would email me and say, I can just imagine you doing the video of this song with lots of smudged black eyeliner and a leather jacket, being like Mark Bolan in Dandy in the Underworld or something, or like Jabriah singing. And I say, yeah, I kind of really, that's how I kind of feel about it. Chris and I finally met over afternoon tea. I'm a big afternoon tea fan. And we said, let's go for afternoon tea. And we met over afternoon tea, and we said, and I was kind of very nervous of meeting him. It was this strange, because we created this strange kind of elemental magic. And we kind of met for afternoon tea, and then Chris came in, and I kind of thought, I know you. And I know you. And I thought, yes, you know me. I did all the backing vocals on Cruelty Without Beauty, Soft Cell record. And I thought, oh my God, Because he did a lot of the BVs on the Culture Without Beauty record, a record which I rate very, very much. It was a long lost kind of soft sell record. But when I did that record, I mean, because Dave was very much in the music side of things, he brought Chris into it, because Chris was actually working with Dave for a while at that moment. And I just passed him in the corridor, you know. I said, well, I've done my vocal bits now, I'm going now. So I passed a figure in the corridor, Chris coming in. Hi, Chris, how are you? Good to go and do some BVs. I thought, that's where I know you from, and that's where the link comes from. And then it all kind of tied up, that we had kind of met and we did kind of know each other. And we had an afternoon tea and we talked about all the things that we talked about over the record. And it was a really a lovely way of making a record, I thought, for a modern way of making a record that I hadn't experienced like this before. And a very fresh, very uncontrived way, very natural way of making a record. I didn't feel drained and exhausted afterwards. And it kind of fired me up a lot, and it brought the whole thing full circle, but my kind of recording things into a kind of a context circle, working with Chris and everything, and brought everything into this package that was kind of the Velvet Trail. When it came to doing the artwork for the record, I'd seen some artwork from my manager, Marc Almond. I'd seen some artwork by an artist called Kate Walters. And I loved it. Again, it was animals metamorphosing into other animals. It was nature things, melting trees, melting into animals. And that, I felt, for me, was a very much spirit of the record, an elemental feel, this kind of mystical feel, this feel of minotaurs and people putting on black leather jackets and turning into mythical creatures and turning into all these things. And the nature of the Velvet Trail as well, the things that you'd find down the Velvet Trail, old bones of the bones of your life, the bones of things, the shells, the forgotten treasures and things. So immediately it was like a revelation. I thought, I've got to have Kate do the artwork for the record, and I think her artwork's really, really beautiful. And working with Intro, who took Kate's artwork and made it into the wonderful art sleeve that it is. The combination of those two, I think, was a perfect combination for the artwork of this record. I love working with Intro because they understand my work perfectly, and they're kind of able to translate it. I've had a problem with artwork in the past, in sleeves and things. I never felt I've kind of got it really great, but since working with Intro over the past 7 or 8 years, what I've done, I feel I've done some great stuff with them. And working with Kate on this album really kind of, she captured what I felt, kind of a spiritual feel about the record. I wanted to do some different clips for the record, and I wanted to approach a couple of different young filmmakers to do something very different. I wasn't so concerned about being in the clips for this record.
When you were afraid, I was there by your side. When you were alone, I was your place to hide. But always in your mind, you were someplace far away. You were someone else I didn't really know at all. When you told
I was interested in seeing how different filmmakers would take a few tracks and make a film of it. So my song would be a soundtrack to their movie. There would be something in the song that would link it to the song. I never intended the two songs of Scar and Pain of Never to go together. They were two separate songs. But Gabriel, when he made the film, found a link between those two songs and made a film that kind of continued. So if people watch the film of Scar, they can then see after the Pain of Never clip, and they kind of follow on from each other. It was important for me to sort of have a different view of people looking at some of the songs that I'd done and doing something that was a bit different to surprise people. I'm not so bothered about being in the videos for my song anymore. It's always just me singing doing a performance, you know, which I can do till the cows come home. But it's nice when I'm not in there, but I'm in there kind of spiritually in some kind of way.
it lasts forever, the pain of never, so much beauty, yet none of it mine. I feel the pain of never all the time.
When the Comet Comes turned into duet with Beth Ditto, and it was a very big surprise to me. I'm a big fan of Beth's. I've met her a couple of times. I never would have dreamed of doing a duet just because I thought we were maybe in two different worlds and two very different voices. And then Chris was working with Beth in the studio in Los Angeles. And Chris played Beth some of the tracks, and Beth just loved the record. She said, I've got to be on this record. I want to be on this record. Chris kind of called me up and said, you know, Beth would like to be on a track on the record. And I said, well, if Beth wants to be on a track, she's got to be on a track. Because I've been absolutely made up about that. And I think that will really surprise people as an unexpected thing. The best collaborations and duets happen in that way. When you plan it and it's planned, so many kind of problems of duets I've done in the past. There's things you've got to take, you know, agendas and egos and people's I want this release and they want their vocals to sound like this. But I know Beth had total faith in Chris. I had total faith in Chris. So I said, well, you know, I'd like to do whatever she wants to do, but I think When the Comet Comes could be a really great duet because we can swap vocals. When the Comet Comes is my celebratory song, and I wanted to write a song that's like The Age of Aquarius from Hair, because that's one of my favourite musicals, one of my favourite soundtracks. I'd loved it ever since I was about 14. Probably one of the first soundtrack records I ever bought. So I always loved The Age of Aquarius. So I wanted When the Comet Comes to be like my Age of Aquarius. I'd imagined us singing in kind of caftans and kind of new or kind of in the nude, kind of singing with kind of joysticks or something, and dancing priests, and Queen Elizabeth, you know, with her crown, sort of waving it, and lots of hippies and things. So When the Comet Comes kind of came out of just Beth being in the studio, just hearing the track and really liking it, and that for me was a real instant duet. That was how duets should happen, I think. When I worked on Tenement Symphony with Trevor Horn, I mean, as wonderful as it was to work with Trevor, and I was very, very lucky to work with him, I did feel very excluded from that record in a way. I felt that Trevor would have kind of like, I felt like artists to kind of phone their performance in a way and not actually come into the studio. It was a very interesting process, but I wouldn't say it was a joyful process working with Trevor, though the results were like, you know, three hit tracks. Hand Over My Heart is one of the best songs that I've ever done. You know, working with Dave Ball and Trevor Horn in that capacity was fantastic. A beautiful track, I think. At that time, I was very consummate, very hands-on with my music, very precious. I've learned to be less like that and be less kind of like open myself up to say, not be so precious. It wasn't that experience with Chris, because we really did have an everyday dialogue, and it really was a songwriting process together. So even though we were in different countries, I was still very much involved in the making of the record, and Chris would send everything to me for approval. And of course I did all the vocals here myself as well, and send them to Chris for his production. But so whereas Tenement Symphony was a different kind of experience, but there are a lot of kind of similarities. I mean, because Chris has worked with Trevor, he knows Trevor. They come from similar places and things. So, but it was a very different experience. I think it was one of the most fun and most freshest experiences that I've ever had working on a record, making this record with the Velvet Trail.